you're always going to be able to go so much further if you're willing to take a chance, but also remember to always lead with curiosity and to remind yourself that at the end of the day, you both are just same people, different font.
Chrislyn is a young cross-culture leader from Texas. Studying human security, she joins many international exchanges, promotes citizen diplomacy, and leads with curiosity.
Everything stems from curiosity, not conflict. I was always into anime as a child. It was something that always drew me to talk with others. It was a community that I found myself in love with, and anime is such a wide breadth of knowledge. And it was actually through watching many different shows that I learned about international relations. I learned on some level what engagement was like across the world. And it really made me think, oh, this is something I could be interested in. This is something I could get involved in. Every single time an opportunity presented itself for me to be a leader in my community or be a bridge for others, I always took that chance. So I mention this a lot, and that is that I am from Texas. And one of the reasons that I always make sure to say I'm from Texas, or I sort of identify as Texan and relate myself back to that identity, is because I believe it's through a strong, firm foundation in your personal identity that you're able to best exchange and talk with others from different cultures or other identities. One of our heaviest and deepest mottos that we rely on is when it comes to making relationships with others, we have always promoted in the state of Texas friendship. Everyone has stereotypes, and stereotypes are just a natural part of the world. So one of the things that I know others believe about Texans is that we always carry weapons, our best friends are cows, and we ride horses to school. These are the top 3 stereotypes I've heard every single time I sort of share that I'm from Texas. I do, of course, love to play around with these stereotypes. I will sometimes share stories. One of the things that I do have fun with is what we call the Southern slang or the Southern drawl, so my accent. A lot of people love the Texas accent, they love the Southern accent, they hear it on TV and media, they hear people use words like y'all and ain't of, and these types of words are very fun to teach to others. They can create connection, they make people feel closer to my home, and I also get a sense of familiarity hearing others use those words.
This strong sense of identity and openness has shaped the Chrislyn's inclusive approach to cultural exchange and guided her on an extraordinary cross-culture journey.
So my very first exchange, the one that I can remember so vividly, was with the National Student Leadership Conference in high school. And I got an invitation to join one of their summer programs, and I chose to join the, I believe it was, international diplomacy track. So my cohort and I met up at Georgetown up in Washington, D.C., and we spent about 2 weeks staying at Georgetown, and we got to learn about international relationships. We got to play simulation games where we pretended to be members of a council. We got to do crisis simulations. We learned about negotiation and mediation strategies. And one of my favorite things was at the end of the night, everyone in the cohort would sit in this giant circle and we would talk about where we were from, where our families were from, the things that interested us in international relations, why we were even there for the summer, where were we going to go in the future. So Sherry Mueller speaks about talking to strangers. And the number one thing you should always do is talk to strangers. And that is the best way to connect with others and also make meaningful moments. I would say that my best talking to strangers moment happened when I was in elementary school and I moved to a new school for the very first time. When I walked in the classroom, I was the new kid. I had just moved near the beginning of the semester, but Everyone else had obviously grown up with each other, and so I was sort of the odd man out, but I got to bond with a lot of the other new kids who had come over books. We would literally pull these little heists while we were sitting in the classroom, and all of us were in the back of the class because we were new, and all the other kids were in the front of the class. And when the teacher's back was turned, we would army crawl over to one of the side walls. And the side wall was this little library full of these little book bins. And we would all reach in and grab out books like Magic Treehouse or Encyclopedia Brown Mysteries. And then we would army crawl back to our desks. And this is back when desks had a little cubby hole in them. And we would shove them in there. And whenever the teacher wasn't looking, we would open and read the books. We would trade them amongst each other. And it became like our little conspiracy. We didn't know a lot about each other. We didn't talk outside of school. We never really hung out. But in these little moments of just doing book heists behind our teacher's back because we didn't like learning about math in elementary school, these are things that can stay with you for a lifetime. And it's those little moments that build a bridge for you later. It's the first step into a path of the unknown.
By a happy coincidence, she took part in the Japan-American Student Conferences, and 3 years later, she came to China and embarked on an extraordinary adventure in the China-American Student Conferences.
We went to China. We succeeded in having a 3-week conference in China, and it was one of the most amazing adventures I'd ever been on. I honestly can say that I had never had an experience like that. I enjoyed a lot of my time there, and the things that I learned and brought back, the friendships I created, the relationships that I cultivated, the experiences that I envisioned having and then got to actually have, probably have transformed my thinking a lot.
The real experiences in China deepened Chrisline's understanding of cultural differences, and the fine moments of trying fermented soybean milk with other delegates led her to reflect on the true meaning of sincere cross-cultural communication.
In China, the precipice of Confucianism, the fact that family is forefront and foremost, the community and then the state is built around family. It is built into the system that currently exists. That is not necessarily the same for a lot of Western societies like the United States. So when you fall into misfortune in China, it could be expected that your family knows, your family will help out, your family will help out with the expectation of either you've helped them before or will help in the future. But at the end of the day, a burden for one is the burden of all. Whereas in the United States, it's one for all. At the end of the day, we just need to recognize that it is a difference of perspective. So in how you frame something and how people approach it, because it's easy to say that everyone in the United States is individualistic, but at the end of the day, we also have many cultures that rely on the family. We have Asian like family culture. We have Hispanic family culture. We have cultures that say that the family will help you out. It's just that the dominant culture would tell you to stand on your own 2 feet by yourself and not rely on others, versus the predominant culture in China would tell you it's okay to lean on others because at the end of the day, they'll find out anyways, so you might as well. And that is my understanding of what kill line means. That is my take on how it is seen through the lens of both China and the United States. I have always loved sensitive conversations, and I love them for the fact that I believe having heart-to-heart moments with others is one of the best ways for understanding to really shine. It's the best way for connection and misunderstanding to be given the stage they deserve, because you can form connections by confronting misunderstanding. And that's something that not a lot of people are willing to do. They want to avoid all of the negatives or all of the stereotypes in favor of only focusing on the positives. But I've found that the best relationships I had are when I sat down, and one of my best techniques is going and prompting, hey, I wanted to ask about this thing that I've seen in the media, or I have heard, or was portrayed to me in a certain perspective, and I just wanted to ask your thoughts about why I was seeing this in the media or framed this way, or why this perspective exists. And I've learned that when you ask someone their thoughts, they're able to give you a sense of understanding and background about how they've arrived to that conclusion about what you're asking, without it being an attack or confrontational in any way, shape, or form. And they're able to then say what they feel or what they think or how this affects them, or sometimes it even prompts them to ask you a question back. But at the end of the day, it makes everyone more comfortable with exchanges. And it lets other people know that you're able to discuss these things without making it feel like an attack or making it seem like you're wrong for wanting to clear up or approach these sensitive issues. It's having those face-to-face, uncensored, unrestricted, free-flowing, communicative conversations. And it honestly fosters a sense of connectivity that can pass on to the next activity they engage in. So if people are real with you during these conferences and these exchanges that you get into, then when you enter into the job market, or you enter into other spaces, or you meet strangers or friends that come from these communities, you have a sense of comfort that your questions won't necessarily be met with conflict, but be seen as curiosity.
From
Because that's what
campus
it
life
is.
to global
Everything
exchanges,
stems from
curiosity
curiosity,
has guided
not
Chrisley's
conflict.
cross-culture practice and shaped her professional work. These experiences also taught her to take the first step bravely.
One of the exchanges that didn't necessarily go as planned was in one of my online exchanges. So this was actually with BCEA. I believe it was the 4th or 5th online exchange. It was really fun, but one of the things I wasn't expecting was not a lot of people wanted to stay online after the official events were over. So I became really close with people who wanted to hang out around online after events were over, but I also had to get used to, during events, reaching out to people and directly inviting them to hang out with me, going, hi, I would love to learn more about you, or I'd love to have a conversation. Would you mind staying a little bit after the lecture and we can hang out? Or directly asking them during the lecture, hey, what are you thinking right now about what the lecturer is saying or what they're presenting about? And while unexpected, I realized that adapting to the circumstances or being the one to reach out first is also a part of cross-cultural exchange. It's taking that first step, being willing to put yourself out there and seeing someone take the second step towards you and reciprocating conversation and saying yes to your invitations. And you might face rejection or you might face silence every now and then, but it's the people who reach back out to you that really build the experience, but also form the friendships that you didn't know you were going to have for the rest of your life. So I met people during that cohort and we're still friends. We text on WhatsApp and other platforms to this day, checking in on each other, celebrating our achievements online, and we never would have formed the friendships on the level we have had we not reached out to each other and reciprocated conversations that we might not have been able to get otherwise. So in every space that I like to be a part of, and especially ones that I make passion projects out of, I have seen a lot of the same faces when I go to trilateral or multilateral platforms or lectures or conferences. And having those previous relationships, having an understanding of what the other person's interests lie in, how they usually respond to conversation, what they're interested in can help in these spaces. And I think that changes every single dynamic, because when you walk in with previous relationships, or you walk in with the ability to understand where others' heads might be at, it makes it that much easier to start a conversation, to continue a conversation, and to capitalize on a conversation. You're always going to be able to go so much further if you're willing to take a chance, but also remember to always lead with curiosity and to remind yourself that at the end of the day, you both are just same people, different font. Listen and location have been the top 2 lessons I've taken away from my roles, because listening is one of the greatest things that you can do in the art of diplomacy. Whether people give you information, whether you learn information, you can only do that by the act of listening. No amount of talking will get you what you're looking for if you're not willing to then sit down and listen to the response. Because there's a difference between hearing something and then listening to it. And it's something that actually comes up a lot when people engage in cross-cultural understanding. I'll always remind them, if you're not listening to people and you're only hearing them, you're going to be much more frustrated and not take away from the conversation what you had entered hoping to gain. If you're hoping to gain insight, if you're hoping to gain relationships, if you're hoping to gain friendship, you must be willing to reciprocate and listen to what the other person is saying so that you can continue said conversation without becoming a megaphone that others aren't able to engage with. And location is just always be aware of your environment, be aware who is around you, and be aware of what spaces you might be talking in, because you might be having some heavy-hitting conversation and maybe that's not appropriate for surrounded by other people who might not want to hear about said heavy conversation. So location is also something I like emphasizing to others. It's sort of like the 3 L's, you could say: listening, location, and at the end of the day, it does come down to luck sometimes, about meeting the right person who is just as inspired by you as you are by them. One indicator that I look for to measure success whenever I get involved in a project that emphasizes in-citizen diplomacy is engagement. And that might be related to the fact that I typically do alumni engagement, and then when I helped do conferences, one of the things I was in charge of was recruitment, which does rely a lot on continued engagement between both the recruiter and the people being recruited. But I see it as a hallmark of not only interest, but continued legacy. When people go and show interest in a program, maybe they won't always end up going through with it, but the fact that they showed interest in the first place, the fact that they engaged, showed that there was success on some level. People who go and show engagement in a process and then end up going through that program and staying involved or staying interested, wanting to see if the program continues to succeed after them, wanting to be affiliated, wanting to interact with people who come after them, that level of engagement should always be the hallmark of a successful operation. What you want to see is people wanting to come back and wanting to continue. Because when you see engagement happen, you know that you've truly caused exchange, you know that you've fostered cross-cultural communication, you know that you've succeeded in creating friendships for others. One of the things that I'm excited to do is to finally branch out and enter the job market, hopefully in a discipline that allows me to utilize my skills in cross-cultural engagement, allows me to utilize my background in international relations and going abroad and engaging with others. I just want to be able to continue to stay in these spaces, to continue to engage with others and build these relationships. I'm also heavily excited about the Quiet Diplomats project that we're doing right now. I'm currently leading the US team as the lead story producer and creating all of these different projects and letting people know that just because you aren't put on this grand stage, it doesn't mean you don't contribute to global citizenship. It doesn't mean you aren't a huge part of how global citizenship and citizen diplomacy is enacted on a day-to-day scale. It means you have contributed in some way, shape, or form to the continued success of citizen diplomacy. And it honestly means that you are a citizen diplomat in essence. If you have ever talked to a stranger, if you have ever fostered understanding, if you have ever engaged with others in order to promote understanding either about them or about yourself, then you are a citizen diplomat, and you are exactly what we hope to elevate and showcase through this project. And I'm hoping that with my master's in human security, with my certificates that I've gained, and with all of my experiences, that as I enter into my career path, I am able to keep up with everything that I've learned. I'm able to utilize the skills. I'm able to engage with others on a more intrinsic and personal level than I was before, and bring that into a professional setting. One of the things I want to impart on others that I hope will inspire them is lead with curiosity, be open, and always be willing to take the first step.